Listen closely, because what I'm about to tell you may completely reframe the way you've been interpreting love your entire life. Have you ever sat there wondering, if they really loved me, why wouldn't they just say it? Have you felt that ache, the silence louder than any argument?
Here's the truth most people never tell you. Some people don't run from love, they run from words.
And if you're waiting for 3 syllables to feel chosen, you might be missing the loudest declaration of love happening right in front of you.
Now let me be clear, avoidant people don't say I love you easily.
Not because they don't feel it, but because to them, words were once unsafe, unreliable, or used as weapons. So they learned something powerful early in life: don't promise what you can't control. And here's the divine principle: truth reveals itself through fruit, not talk. You see, when an avoidant loves you, they don't perform affection. They build stability. They fix what's broken. They stay when things get uncomfortable, even when every instinct in them says, pull back. That's not absence. That's discipline. An avoidant says, I love you, when they consistently choose you, especially when it comes to running. STs them comfort, when they give you space instead of control, when they don't invade your soul but protect it, when they show up at 2 a.m., not with poetry, but with solutions. That behavior screams love. Here's the mistake most people make. They measure love by expression, not devotion. But devotion is the highest form of love. Anyone can say words when emotions are high. Very few can stay grounded when emotions are messy. Avoidants love like architects, not poets. They don't paint pictures with language. They lay foundations with action. And if you're truly awake, you'll stop asking, why don't they say it? And start asking, what are they consistently choosing? Because love is not what someone feels in a moment. Love is what they do over time. Now let me challenge you, because growth demands honesty. If you require constant verbal reassurance to feel safe, that's not love you're seeking, that's certainty. And certainty doesn't come from other people. It comes from knowing your own worth. When you stand whole, when you're anchored in purpose, you stop begging for words and start recognizing truth. You realize that love isn't loud, it's steady. It's not dramatic, it's devoted. It's not always emotional, it's intentional. And here's the final truth. Some people say, I love you, and disappear when life gets hard. Avoidants stay and never say a word. So don't listen only with your ears. Listen with your awareness. Because the deepest love doesn't shout, it shows up. Avoidant individuals often express love through consistent action rather than verbal affirmation, and understanding this single truth can radically change how you interpret relationships. Most people are conditioned to equate love with words, 3 syllables spoken at the right time, in the right tone, with the right emotion. But for avoidants, words are not the currency of truth. Action is. And once you understand why, their behavior stops looking cold and starts revealing quiet devotion. Avoidant people learned early in life that words were unstable. Promises were made and broken. Affection was conditional. Emotional expression may have been followed by disappointment, rejection, or even punishment. So the nervous system adapted. It said, don't say what you feel unless you're absolutely certain it won't be used against you. Over time, this creates a powerful internal rule: love music, to be proven, not proclaimed. That's why an avoidant won't rush to say, I love you, not because they don't feel it, but because saying it feels like signing a contract they once watched get torn apart. To them, words are fragile, behavior is solid. Anyone can talk. Only a few can consistently show up. So how does love come out when words are locked behind caution? It comes out in patterns. It comes out in reliability. It comes out in effort that doesn't need an audience. An avoidant expresses love by being consistent when there's nothing to gain. They remember what matters to you. They adjust their routines to make space for you. They may not verbalize their emotions, but they reorganize their life to include you in it. and that takes far more commitment than words ever could. They express love through problem solving. When something in your life is falling apart, they don't panic or dramatize it. They move into action. They look for solutions. That's not emotional distance. That's emotional responsibility. It's their way of saying, your stability matters to me. They express love by respecting your autonomy. Avoidants don't cling. They don't smother. They don't control.
And while
That can be misinterpreted as lack of interest. It's often the opposite. They know how painful it is to lose yourself in a relationship, so they refuse to do that to you. Giving you space is not withdrawal, it's protection. Consistency is the key signal. Anyone can be affectionate when things are easy. Avoidants show love by staying steady when things are uncomfortable. They may struggle to talk about feelings, but they don't disappear when life gets hard. They stay present. They stay engaged. They stay loyal to the connection even when their nervous system is screaming to retreat. This is where most people misjudge them. They listen for words instead of watching behavior. They miss the daily acts of commitment because they're waiting for a declaration. But love is not a speech. Love is a pattern. An avoidant who checks in without being asked, who shows up on time, who keeps their word, who supports you quietly, who defends the relationship through action. That person is communicating love fluently in their own language. The tragedy happens when their partner doesn't speak that language and assumes silence means absence. Understanding this doesn't mean ignoring your own needs. It means expanding your awareness. It means learning to read love not just through emotion, but through integrity. Because when someone consistently chooses you with their behavior, they are telling the truth even if their mouth stays quiet. For avoidance, love is not something you announce. It's something you live. Avoidant individuals reveal the depth of their love most clearly in moments of crisis, because crisis strips away performance and exposes priority. When everything is calm, words are easy. Affection flows freely. Anyone can say the right thing when there is no emotional cost. But when life applies pressure, when fear, uncertainty, or chaos enter the room, an avoidant's true attachment style becomes visible. And what you often find there is not abandonment, but grounded presence. For someone with avoidant tendencies, emotional intensity can feel overwhelming. Strong feelings activate old survival patterns. Stay composed, stay useful, stay in control. So when a crisis hits, they don't fall apart emotionally. They don't dramatize. They don't flood the space with reassurance or poetic comfort. Instead, they move into function. They stabilize. They assess. They take responsibility. And that for them is love in its purest form. This is why an avoidant may appear calm when you are distressed, not because they don't care, but because caring pushes them into action rather than expression. Their nervous system says, fix what's breaking. While others may respond with emotional intensity, the avoidant responds with structure. They make phone calls. They find solutions. They stay alert. They hold the ground so everything doesn't collapse. In moments of crisis, an avoidant shows love by not leaving. This is critical. Their instinct under emotional pressure is often to withdraw, to create distance, to regulate themselves. So when they stay, when they remain physically or practically present despite discomfort, that is a significant act of devotion. It means you matter more than their urge to escape. You'll notice this especially when the crisis is not about them. When you are sick, overwhelmed, or struggling, an avoidant may not know how to comfort you with words, but they will drive you where you need to go. They will take care of tasks you can't manage. They will quietly shoulder responsibility without asking for praise. They don't announce their sacrifice. They similarly do it. This behavior is often misunderstood. Partners may say they didn't say anything comforting without realizing that the avoidant rearranged their entire life to support the situation. To the avoidant, Actions are not a substitute for love, they are the proof of it. Words feel insufficient in the face of real problems. Doing something feels honest. Crisis also exposes loyalty. Avoidants may struggle with emotional closeness, but they are often deeply loyal when it truly matters. When things fall apart, they don't run towards something easier. They dig in. They handle what needs to be handled. That is their way of saying, I'm here even when this is hard. There is also a quiet courage in this. Avoidants often face crisis while suppressing their own emotional response. They put their feelings aside so the situation can be managed. That doesn't mean they aren't affected. It means they prioritize stability over expression. And that kind of self-regulation is a form of love that is rarely acknowledged. The tragedy happens when their partner equates love solely with emotional reassurance. In those moments, the avoidant's steady presence is overlooked and resentment grows on. Both sides. The avoidant feels unrecognized. The partner feels unsupported. But the truth is that love was present, it just spoke a different language. When you understand this, everything changes. You stop asking, why didn't they say more? And start noticing they didn't leave, they didn't collapse, they carried the weight. That's not emotional absence. That's emotional strength. For avoidance, crisis is not the place for poetry. It's the place where commitment shows itself through action, steadiness, and the willingness to stand firm when everything else is shaking. Avoidant individuals often express love by honoring boundaries and protecting independence, both yours and theirs, and this can look confusing in a world that equates love with fusion, constant contact, and emotional merging. Many people are taught that closeness means access, that love means availability at all times, and that commitment requires losing parts of yourself. Avoidance learned the opposite lesson early in life. When boundaries disappear, safety disappears too. So when they love, they do not consume. They contain. To an avoidant, respecting boundaries is not distance, it is reverence. They understand sometimes unconsciously, that real love does not invade. It does not demand emotional exposure on command. It does not treat another person's inner world as property. Instead, it protects individuality, because individuality is what makes connection sustainable. This is why avoidants rarely push. They don't pressure you to open up before you're ready. They don't interrogate your emotions. They don't insist on constant reassurance. While this can be misread as emotional disinterest, it is often a deliberate restraint. They know what it feels like to be overwhelmed, so they refuse to overwhelm you. Avoidants express love by allowing you to remain whole. They don't require you to perform closeness. They don't need you to collapse your world into theirs. If you need space, they respect it. If you need time, they give it. And in a culture that glorifies intensity over sustainability, this kind of love can go unnoticed or even unappreciated. Protecting independence is also self-protection. Avoidants fear enmeshment because enmeshment once meant losing themselves. So when they maintain their own space, routines, and autonomy, it is not a rejection of the relationship. It is how they stay right. Egulated enough to remain in it. Paradoxically, the space they preserve is what allows them to stay connected at all. This is where misunderstanding often turns into conflict. A partner may interpret an avoidance need for space as lack of commitment, when in reality it is the very mechanism that keeps the avoidant committed. Without boundaries, they shut down. With boundaries, they stay engaged. Avoidants show love by trusting you with your own life. They don't try to fix every emotion you have. They don't take responsibility for your feelings. That may feel unfamiliar to those who equate love with emotional management, but it is actually a sign of respect. They believe you are capable. They believe you can handle your inner world, and they don't infantilize you by overstepping. There is also an ethical dimension to this kind of love. Avoidants are often deeply aware usually unconsciously, of the harm that comes from emotional intrusion. So they err on the side of restraint. They ask permission rather than assume access. They wait rather than demand. They choose not to cross lines even when emotions are strong. This restraint is not coldness. It is discipline. It is the kind of discipline that says, I will not violate you to soothe my own anxiety. And that is a rare form of love. However, this love requires interpretation. If you only recognize affection when it is overt, you may miss the devotion embedded in respect. You may mistake freedom for distance. You may confuse non-intrusion with indifference. But once you understand the language, you begin to see how profound it is. An avoidant who respects your boundaries is saying, I care enough not to control you. An avoidant who protects independence is saying, I want you whole, not absorbed. That is not a lack of love. That is love without possession. Avoidant individuals often communicate love through presence rather than performance, and this distinction changes everything once you learn to see it. In a culture that celebrates grand gestures, emotional displays, and constant verbal reassurance, it's easy to overlook the quiet power of someone who simply stays. Avoidants are rarely expressive in ways that draw attention, but they are often deeply committed in ways that endure. Their love is not theatrical. It is grounded. Presence, for an avoidant, means staying connected without needing to be seen or validated for it. They don't feel the need to announce their care. They don't perform emotion to prove their sincerity. Instead, they offer something far more stable: consistency. They are there in ordinary moments, not just special ones. They remain part of your life not as an event, but as a constant. This is why avoidance can appear emotionally flat while still being deeply involved. They may not mirror your excitement or intensity, but they don't disappear. They answer when it matters. They show up when it counts. They remain engaged even when there is no emotional reward. That quiet steadiness is not indifference, it is endurance. Performance-driven affection seeks reaction. It wants reassurance, validation, and emotional feedback. Presence-driven affection seeks connection without demand. Avoidants lean toward the second. Their nervous system is calibrated for containment, not display. So, expressing love loudly, they express it reliably. You'll notice this in how they handle everyday life. They keep plans. They follow through. They remember responsibilities. They may not talk about the relationship often, but they behave as if it is a given something already. Die chosen, not something constantly up for negotiation. This can feel unsatisfying to someone who needs frequent emotional confirmation, but it is deeply meaningful when you understand it. Avoidants show presence by staying engaged even when conversations are uncomfortable. They may struggle to articulate feelings, but they don't always avoid the situation entirely. They sit with discomfort longer than you realize. They listen more than they speak. They remain in the room emotionally, even if they don't fill the silence with words. There is also a humility in this kind of love. Avoidants don't center themselves as the emotional focus of the relationship. They don't need to be constantly reassured of their importance. Their presence is not about being seen, it's about being useful, supportive, and steady. They offer love in a way that does not compete for attention. This can be deeply stabilizing, especially in long-term relationships. Over time, performance-based affection can fluctuate with mood, stress, or insecurity. Presence-based affection remains. It doesn't spike dramatically, but it doesn't disappear either. It creates a sense of reliability that builds trust slowly but power. Are fully. The difficulty arises when presence is mistaken for emotional absence. When someone expects love to look like enthusiasm, expression, or constant affirmation, they may misinterpret steadiness as lack of passion. But passion that burns loudly often burns out. Presence is what remains when the fire settles into warmth. Avoidants are often at their most loving when nothing dramatic is happening. In shared routines, in quiet companionship, in mutual respect. They don't need intensity to feel connected. They need continuity, and they offer that continuity in return. To understand this kind of love, you must shift your attention. Stop listening only for words. Stop watching only for gestures meant to impress. Start noticing who stays, who remains consistent, who does not vanish when attention fades. Because when someone chooses presence over performance, they are not trying to convince you of their love. They are living it. Avoidant individuals often express love through loyalty, problem-solving, and long-term commitment rather than emotional display. And this form of love is one of the most misunderstood yet enduring. In a world where affection is often measured by intensity, expression, and emotional transparency, avoidants operate from a different internal compass. They equate love with responsibility. To them, caring deeply means ensuring stability, reducing risk, and building something that lasts. Loyalty for an avoidant is not loud. It is quiet and unwavering. They don't constantly reaffirm their devotion because, in their mind, devotion is already assumed once a bond is formed. When they commit internally first. That commitment shows up not in declarations, but in consistency over time. They don't entertain emotional alternatives easily. They don't bounce from connection to connection seeking validation. When they choose you in a grounded, deliberate way. Problem solving is another core expression of love for avoidance. Emotions, especially intense ones, can feel overwhelming or unmanageable to them. So instead of amplifying feelings, they focus on fixing what causes distress. If something threatens the relationship, they look for practical solutions. They ask, often silently, what needs to be done so this doesn't fall apart. That question itself is an act of love. This can be misread as emotional avoidance, but it is. Actually emotional investment. They are invested enough to want the problem resolved, not just expressed. While others may seek closeness through emotional sharing, avoidants seek security through structure. They believe that a stable environment is the greatest gift they can offer someone they love. Long-term commitment is where avoidant love becomes most visible. They are rarely impulsive with attachment. They don't rush into promises. They move slowly, carefully, sometimes frustratingly so, but that slowness is intentional. They are measuring sustainability. They are asking themselves whether this connection can endure without costing them their sense of self. Once an avoidant commits long-term, it is not a casual decision. It is the result of deep internal evaluation. They stay not because they are emotionally swept away, but because they have decided the relationship is worth the effort, the discomfort, and the growth. That kind of commitment is resilient. It does not depend on constant emotional highs to survive. Avoidants also show love by preparing for the future. They think ahead. They consider consequences. They try to prevent problems before they arise. This foresight, planning, is rarely romanticized, but it is profoundly loving. It says, I am thinking about us beyond this moment. Their loyalty is especially visible during conflict. While they may withdraw emotionally, they often do not betray the relationship. They don't weaponize vulnerability. They don't seek comfort elsewhere. They hold the line even if they struggle internally. That restraint is a form of integrity. The challenge comes when their partner expects love to look emotionally expressive. The avoidance efforts may go unnoticed because they don't come wrapped in reassurance or passion. But beneath the surface, there is a steady investment being made: time, energy, thought, and responsibility. To understand avoidant love, you must broaden your definition of intimacy. Intimacy is not only sharing feelings, it is sharing life. It is building systems, solving problems together, and staying when it would be easier to disengage.
Avoidants may not cry with you.
They may not say the perfect words, but they will stand beside you, plan with you, and commit to the long road. And that, in its own quiet way, is love that lasts. Key point 6. Avoidants express love through emotional self-control and resistance. Train, choosing regulation over reaction as a way to protect the relationship. Avoidant individuals often demonstrate love through emotional self-control and restraint, a behavior that is frequently misunderstood as emotional coldness. In reality, this restraint is one of the most demanding forms of care. It requires constant internal regulation, awareness, and discipline. Where others may express love by releasing emotion outward, avoidants express it by containing emotion inward for the sake of stability, safety, and preservation of the bond. For an avoidant, intense emotion feels risky, not because emotion is bad, but because in their early experiences, emotion often led to chaos, loss of control, or relational damage. So they learned a powerful survival strategy. Stay composed, stay measured. Don't let emotions spill out unchecked. Over time, this strategy becomes a form of protection not only for themselves but for the relationship they value. When an avoidant restrains their reactions during conflict, it is often an act of love. They may feel anger, fear, hurt, or overwhelmed just as deeply as anyone else, but instead of unleashing it, they hold it back. They choose not to escape. Elate. They choose not to say the thing that would wound. They choose not to turn emotion into a weapon. That restraint is intentional. This is especially visible in moments of disagreement. While others may raise their voice or push for emotional resolution immediately, an avoidant may pause, go quiet, or step back. This is not indifference. It is containment. They are trying to prevent damage before it happens. They understand, often instinctively, that words spoken in emotional chaos can destroy trust permanently. Avoidants often carry the belief that love must be protected from volatility, so they become guardians of emotional stability. They suppress impulses to react dramatically. They limit emotional expression not because they don't feel, but because they feel deeply and fear the consequences of unfiltered expression. This restraint also shows up in how they love during emotional highs. Avoidants may not gush, exaggerate, or idealize. They keep their emotions grounded. They don't rush declarations. They don't inflate promises. This is not a lack of passion, that is emotional sobriety. They don't want to build a relationship on intensity that cannot be sustained. What many people fail to see is the internal cost of this restraint. Avoidants are constantly managing themselves. They are monitoring their tone, their words, their reactions. They are making conscious choices to stay regulated even when their nervous system is activated. That level of self-management requires effort, maturity, and care. This is why avoidants can seem calm even when situations are emotionally charged. Their calm is not the absence of feeling. It is the presence of control. And control, in this context, is an act of love. It says, I value this connection too much to let my emotions damage it. The misunderstanding arises when restraint is mistaken for distance. When someone expects love to look like emotional overflow, they may interpret control as withholding. But for avoidance, restraint is not withholding love, it is how love is preserved. They believe that not every emotion needs to be expressed immediately. Not every feeling needs to be shared. Some emotions need to be processed privately so the relationship doesn't carry unnecessary weight. This belief allows them to keep relationships functional, stable, and long-lasting. An avoidant who restrains themselves is saying, without words, I am choosing the relationship over my impulse. They are choosing safety over reaction, longevity over intensity, integrity over release. That choice is not emotional absence. It is emotional responsibility. Love is not always loud, poetic, or perfectly spoken. Sometimes love is disciplined. Sometimes it is steady. Sometimes it is a person choosing you again and again through action, loyalty, restraint, and presence, even when their own fears are activated. When you expand your understanding of love beyond words, you stop mislabeling devotion as distance. You begin to recognize truth not by what is said in a moment, but by what is lived over time. And when you learn to see love clearly, you stop chasing reassurance and start honoring reality. Thank you for allowing this message to meet you where you are. Take this awareness with you, apply it to your relationships, and let it transform how you give and receive love. Trust what is consistent. Trust what stays. Trust what builds. God bless you. Keep growing, and goodbye.